Hello, this is Ariadne Rainbird talking today about a more psychological subject. And the subject of my talk today is being different, how experiences of neurodiversity and positive schizotypy may lead to adopting alternative spiritual paths, such as paganism. It is often said amongst modern pagans and witches that one does not become a witch, but that one is born a witch, suggesting that there is something different about those who are attracted to witchcraft and paganism, that there is something which sets them apart from other members of society right from birth. Studies of the conversion experiences of pagans, such as that by Anczyk and Vencalek in 2013, discuss the view that pagans do not consider that they undergo conversion, but that they rather experience a feeling of coming home when they discover paganism, often feeling that they have now found a name for what they always were. Anczyk and Vencalek cite Margot Adler, who in her book Drawing Down the Moon quotes people describing themselves finally finding a group with the same perceptions that they have and finding that they're not alone in the world. And I must say that when I came to paganism, it did feel like I'd found my people. Pagans often explore other paths before coming to paganism and are looking for a spiritual home. And according to Galtzin 2016, modern pagans convert consciously, gradually accepting the tenets and practices of paganism, and often at a mature age. Although it could be argued that converts to other religions feel similarly about their conversion experiences, with a feeling of coming home being reported by some members of, for example, the Unification Church, as well as some converts to the major religions. Most people coming to paganism do not report making significant changes to their beliefs and behaviours. Experiences may be reinterpreted, and ideas which were once peripheral may become more central. But overall, pagans report that they have found their spiritual roots and a path which fits their identity, their particular way of seeing the world and their spiritual needs. In initiatory traditions, initiation marks acceptance into a community of like-minded people, as well as a commitment to train in and follow a particular path. Johnston, cited in Heart 2020, interviewed several pagans regarding their conversion experiences and found that they described their religious adherence as deriving from deep inner desires and inclinations for spiritual expression. The initial exposure to paganism is described as the moment in which they discovered a label and community that represented and legitimised a self always already there. Johnston distinguishes between religious conversion experiences which stress continuity from those which stress discontinuity. Rather than discovering something previously unknown and taking on a new belief structure and outlook, pagans find a group of people and a path that legitimises feelings and beliefs they already had, and within it they find acceptance. Little research, however, appears to have been undertaken regarding how pagans felt prior to coming into paganism, whether, for example, they felt accepted, acknowledged and validated for who they were prior to finding their pagan path, or whether feelings of alienation and difficulties with fitting in predominated. In my own experience, many pagans I know have reported feeling different and having difficulties with fitting in prior to coming to paganism. In this presentation, I seek to explore the possible reasons why pagans feel different. One possible reason I've considered is that there do appear to be a high percentage of people with neurodiverse conditions such as attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, dyspraxia, and autistic spectrum disorders within the pagan population. Neurodiversity refers to the idea that neurological differences such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and other neurological variations are natural and valuable aspects of human diversity. Individuals with neurodiverse experiences often perceive and interact with the world in ways that diverge from the dominant neurotypical paradigm. These differences can manifest in various cognitive, emotional, and sensory processes, leading to unique ways of experiencing and understanding the world. Another possible factor is the concept of positive schizotypy, which includes unusual experiences and is often associated with creativity. Positive schizotypy encompasses a range of traits and experiences that are related to but distinct from schizophrenia. These traits include magical thinking, unusual perceptual experiences, and a proclivity towards unconventional beliefs and ideas. Importantly, positive schizotypy does not necessarily indicate psychopathology. Rather, it represents a spectrum of experiences that can be adaptive and enriching for individuals who possess these traits. There may be a propensity for individuals with neurodiverse experiences and positive schizotypy to be more inclined to adopt alternative spiritual paths due to their unique perspectives and ways of thinking. In a survey I recently carried out on paganism, neurodiversity and conversion experiences, I found that of my sample of 143 individuals who identified as pagan, 13% of the sample stated that they never felt that they fitted in anywhere growing up, with only 5% stating that they felt they fitted in and had lots of friends. 30% reported finding it difficult to fit in most of the time and having few friends, whilst 15% found activities and friends outside of school where they felt they fitted in better, but that they did not fit in at school. When asked how they feel now, 33% reported always feeling different from people in general society, with 5% stating that they often felt alienated, and only 1% stating that they have never felt alienated or different in general society. Comments included, "My friends were fairies," and "I don't feel different, I am different." 37% of the sample had a diagnosis of a neurodivergent condition, such as autistic spectrum disorder, ASD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia or dyspraxia, with several respondents reporting more than one diagnosis. Of those who did not have a diagnosis, 67% believed that they had an undiagnosed neurodivergent condition. These figures are far higher than would be expected amongst the general population, though it is possible that there was some response bias due to the title of the survey, which may have attracted more people with neurodivergent conditions to respond. Nygren, 2023, discusses autistic spirituality and how autism may lead to a greater empathy with nature due to the experiences of feeling different within society. Feelings of alienation in human company may lead to a greater relationship with the more than human and a post-humanist spirituality. Some autistic people may develop a relationship with nature and other species which can be stronger and more genuine than that which they are able to have with other humans. Nygren argues that people with autism are often treated as being less than human in society, and that this can lead to them developing a stronger relationship with the more than human and finding allies outside of human society and civilization. She describes an autistic spirituality which does not segregate different life forms, but has an ethics which encompasses all life. Nygren refers to the autobiographies of Greta Thunberg and Mary Temple Grandin, both of whom are on the autistic spectrum, and believe that their autism has contributed to their spirituality and extended their compassion to the more than human. Grandin describes herself as being more attuned to animals than to humans, and Thunberg believes that it is her Asperger's syndrome that makes her able to focus her attention and care on the world's climate. Both autistic spectrum conditions and ADHD can not only lead an individual to feeling isolated and alienated within human society, but can lead them to hyperfocus on areas of interests and their particular passions, which in the cases of some neurodiverse people may be environmental and ecological issues, or animal rights, or a focus on other non-human entities, such as perceived spiritual beings. Some people with neurodiverse conditions may therefore be attracted to forms of spirituality which emphasise a closeness to nature and spending time out communing with nature. Paganism also tends to be, with some exceptions, open and inclusive, and people with neurodiverse conditions may also be more comfortable in a spiritual path in which individual differences are accepted and respected. Paganism has a tendency to attract people whose life experiences, values and lifestyles do not fit into mainstream culture and society. People who have often felt marginalised, and this includes a high number of LGBTQI+ people as well as those with neurodiverse conditions. Farias, Underwood and Claridge in 2012 discussed research linking modern alternative spiritualities such as paganism and New Age thinking with benign or positive schizotypy or insecure attachment styles. Insecure attachment results from adverse childhood experiences, and in this view, adherence to a spiritual path is seen as a psychological compensation for neglect and traumas in childhood. The spiritual path and new spiritual family replace the dysfunctional family experiences which have led to the insecure attachment style. However, Farias et al.'s research did not support the hypothesis that adherence to modern alternative spiritualities was linked with insecure attachment or with anxiety or depression, but that unusual experiences and ideas are the major predictor of whether a person will become involved in modern alternative spiritual practices. Farias et al. Argue that those with spiritual beliefs generally report high social support satisfaction and that there is a correlation between spirituality, mental health, and well-being. The concept of positive schizotypy describes a benign or adaptive schizotypal disposition, which goes hand in hand with positive well-being and good mental health, though includes characteristics associated with schizotypal personality disorder or schizophrenia, such as unusual experiences, delusional ideation and magical thinking. Of course, we can question what makes an idea delusional, and the answer is not always straightforward. To many materialists and atheists, any religious ideas or ideas of deity are delusional, and this would include mainstream religions as well as alternative spirituality. Pagan and New Age ideations may be considered to be more delusional, however, in mainstream society, as they are less widely accepted than the major world religions. Farias et al. Argue that unusual psychotic-like experiences may commonly occur amongst individuals who are mentally healthy, and that there is a danger of pathologizing eccentric or different behaviour and experience. Modern spiritualities such as paganism allow those who have such unusual experiences and alternative beliefs to express themselves and to find a home with other like-minded people. And this is likely to contribute to the coming home feeling that many pagans report when they find paganism or other alternative spiritual paths. Alternative spiritual paths encompass a diverse array of belief systems, practices and worldviews that exist outside the mainstream religious traditions. These paths may include, but are not limited to, neo-paganism, shamanism, animism, and various New Age and esoteric traditions. What unites these paths is a departure from conventional religious norms and an emphasis on personal experience, individual autonomy, and holistic approaches to spirituality. Farias et al. Found a high incidence of psychotic characteristics in the normal population, including beliefs in the paranormal and out-of-body experiences, which could be described as dissociation in psychological terms. Followers of modern alternative spiritualities scored higher on delusional ideation and unusual perceptual experiences when compared to followers of traditional religions, but were in good mental health. Farias et al. Propose a dimensional model of psychosis in which mental illness, including psychosis and schizotypal personality, are on a continuum with normal and healthy experience. It is the level of distress associated with a delusion which determines the development of mental illness. The way that experiences are interpreted will influence whether they cause distress or not, and pagan and other alternative spiritual beliefs may provide a framework for positive interpretation of unusual experiences, which protect the individual from feeling distressed by them. Moore and Claridge, 2015, also discuss the occurrence of psychotic-like thoughts in the general non-clinical population and argue that some dimensions of schizotypy may be useful for healthy functioning, whilst other dimensions may not be so useful. They argue that there may be some evolutionary advantages of certain aspects of psychosis, although in the non-clinical population, schizotypal traits are often associated with lower life satisfaction and negative feelings. These associations are with the negative and disorganised types of schizotypy and not with positive schizotypy. Moore and Claridge argue that various studies have linked positive schizotypy to positive, pleasant and enriching experiences. Positive schizotypal traits were also found to be higher amongst adherents of alternative spiritualities such as Krishna consciousness and Druidry than amongst adherents of more mainstream religions, or amongst non-religious groups. Followers of modern spiritualities such as paganism are higher in magical thinking and beliefs in healing spirits, but not high in negative characteristics such as paranoid ideation. Rather, they feel a sense of connectedness with nature and the universe, and tend to make more cognitive associations and are emotionally sensitive or empathic. Alternative spiritualities give meaning to such experiences, as well as a sense of acceptance, both self-acceptance and acceptance by others who have similar experiences. Moore and Claridge argue that people high in positive schizotypy have unconventional thinking styles and are able to think outside the box more and come up with creative solutions to problems, though schizotypy is not associated with better logical thinking. Schizotypy is also positively associated with creativity, with schizophrenic and bipolar traits also being linked with creativity. Dagnall, Parker and Munley in 2007 investigated whether belief in the paranormal or magical thinking is linked to weaknesses in probabilistic reasoning or perception of randomness, and theorised that people who believe in the paranormal or magic would have a weakness in probabilistic thinking and make more errors in probabilistic reasoning than non-believers. Their study found that although people with paranormal beliefs did show a weakness in perception of randomness, i.e. they underestimated the probability of chance occurrences and thus perceived meaningful connections in random occurrences, they did not have weaknesses in general probabilistic reasoning. People with positive schizotypy tend to see patterns in random events and to make associations between them. And such associations are the basis of various divination systems used in pagan and magical traditions. But believing in the effectiveness of such systems does not indicate a weakness in reasoning ability, but a different and more intuitive thinking style. Neurodivergent conditions such as ASD and schizotypy can both lead to individuals feeling different and alienated in society, and lead them to explore alternative communities and spiritual paths in which they can express their differences. However, there has been a common conception that autism and schizotypy are opposite ends of a spectrum, such that if you have one, you cannot have the other. Anderson, 2022, argues that autism is thought to result from a predictive processing mechanism in which the individual will put an inflexibly high emphasis on sensory information, which is influenced by sensory processing difficulties, and which in turn influence their predictions about the world, causing them to overfit their predictive models to the world. Thus, people on the autistic spectrum put an undue weight on their sensory experiences, which in turn influence their theory of mind, executive functioning, and cognitive coherence. Anderson argues that at the other end of the spectrum, people who are predisposed to psychosis or are high in schizotypy characteristics may give an inflexibly low weight to sensory input. As a result, they're more exploratory, intuitive, imaginative, and have very idiosyncratic worldviews. Anderson considers William Blake to be an example of someone with positive schizotypy who had hallucinations and visions, but ones which were not dysfunctional and did not adversely affect his life or cause him distress, but rather inspired him as an artist and a mystic. Carl Jung is another example. Anderson refers to the autism schizotypy continuum and suggests that autistic type traits and positive schizotypy are the opposing ends of a spectrum for the mentally well population. Anderson refers to the autistic types and schizotypes, with everyone falling somewhere upon this continuum, and neither pole being necessarily dysfunctional. People high in autistic traits tend to be more detail-oriented, focused, and pay attention to sensory stimuli, whereas those high in schizotypy are more imaginative and creative and are able to switch attention more easily. Anderson argues that there is a high occurrence of schizotypy amongst artists compared to non-artists, and that artists high in positive schizotypy spend a lot of time in an imaginative daydreaming. Anderson argues that autistic-like traits and schizotypy have opposite functions in spirituality and the search for meaning, with people high in autistic traits being more likely to adopt culturally inherited belief and values, which provide some sense of coherence, order, and a sense of security. Those with schizotypy, on the other hand, would be more likely to want to construct their own meaning and be on a continual quest for meaning and new spiritualities. According to Anderson, autistic traits are more associated with atheism, whilst schizotypy may lead individuals to seek alternative spiritual paths. This would not explain, however, why so many pagans report neurodiverse conditions such as autism, although paganism does not necessarily require a belief in deity, and some pagans are non-theistic. However, Anderson states that there have been several studies which have not supported the association of autistic traits with atheism, and concludes that although research indicates that positive schizotypy is associated with unconventional beliefs and worldviews, that there is insufficient evidence for the opposite being true of autistic traits. Giorgio Del Fabbro and Balzan in 2021 also focus on the different thinking styles of people with autistic traits and those with schizotypy, and argue that both factor in alternative beliefs, though focus on conspiracy theories, but for different reasons. Schizotypal traits including anomalies in cognition, hallucinations, magical thinking, proneness to delusions, unfounded inferences and connections, defects in emotional functioning, a higher need for cognitive closure, odd behaviours and language can make a person more prone to strange or odd beliefs. People with schizotypy can find it difficult to separate fictitious from factual information. People on the autistic spectrum, on the other hand, may have a rigid, inflexible thinking style with abnormal focus on specific details, which can impair their ability to weigh up information and reason effectively. They may not be able to be adaptable in their thinking or be open to new information which contradicts their beliefs or experiences. People on the autistic spectrum may find ambiguity distressful and seek an explanation which they will then be reluctant to shift from. Giorgio et al. Argue that people with autistic traits and those with schizotypy use different types of reasoning when they process new information, with those with schizotypy using intuitive reasoning and those with autistic traits using a more analytic thinking style. Giorgio et al. Focused on schizotypy as a whole rather than positive schizotypy, and looked at the relationship with beliefs in conspiracy theories rather than paganism or other alternative spiritualities. But their findings are interesting in that they found that, firstly, schizotypy and ASD could co-occur, particularly in clinical populations, and are not therefore at opposite ends of a spectrum. And secondly, that although schizotypy is generally characterised by a higher use of and preference for intuitive thinking, that those individuals with high schizotypy who also had a high use of logical thinking were less prone to belief in conspiracy theories, whereas being higher in logical thinking actually increased those on the autistic spectrum's likelihood of belief in conspiracy theories. Giorgio et al. Found that autistic and schizotypy traits were related, and how both relate to alternative spiritualities, as opposed to conspiracy theories, would be an interesting topic for further research, particularly as many pagans relate to the concept of positive schizotypy, as well as believing they are on the autistic spectrum. Regarding the possible connection between schizotypy and ASD, or whether they are polar opposites, it was once thought that ASD and ADHD were opposites that could not co-occur. And in older editions of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, they were seen as mutually exclusive. Barlatani et al. In 2023 state that in DSM-4 the presence of a pervasive developmental disorder, autism, was considered to be an exclusion criterion for a diagnosis of ADHD. It is now widely accepted that the various developmental disorders such as ASD, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, etc. often co-occur, and that comorbidity is the norm rather than the exception. Autism rarely presents in a pure form, but is a spectrum of different presentations and is often comorbid with ADHD. ASD and ADHD also both often co-occur with psychiatric disorders such as depression, anxiety, mood disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorders, etc. Co-occurrence has also been found between ASD and personality disorders, including schizotypal personality disorder. At the non-clinical level, then, it is also perfectly possible for an individual to have traits of both ASD and schizotypy, and for these to manifest in more positive ways. The potential connections between neurodiversity, positive schizotypy, and alternative spiritual paths are multifaceted and complex. One possible avenue of exploration is the heightened sensitivity and perceptual acuity often associated with neurodiverse experiences and positive schizotypy. Individuals with these traits may be more attuned to subtle energies, non-ordinary states of consciousness, and to the interconnectedness of all things, which aligns with many alternative spiritual perspectives. Many articles on religious and mystical experiences use language which seems to pathologise such experiences. Even the term positive schizotypy is drawn from psychopathology and focuses on how some characteristics generally associated with mental illness can sometimes miraculously also be associated with good mental health and positive outcomes. Bitena and Martinson in 2021 argue that some researchers treat mystical experiences as being signs of mental illness. Others, on the other hand, focus on the positive aspects and how mystical experiences can lead to growth and maturity, and can bring about positive changes to a person's value system and the way they see the world and life. Bitena and Martinson argue that there is a positive relationship between mystical experience and what they refer to as spiritual intelligence. They argue that mystical experience has a stronger relationship with spiritual intelligence than it does with pathological concepts such as schizotypy and psychosis. They define spiritual intelligence as a positive concept relating to psychological health and including the ability to enter and exit higher states of consciousness. However, to some psychologists, spirituality and mystical experiences are associated with pathology. Bitena and Martinson argue that research has shown mystical experiences to have both positive effects and to be similar to a psychotic episode, and that professionals are often unable to distinguish mystical experience from mental illness. This can lead to mistreatment, stigmatisation, and a loss of the potentially beneficial effects of the mystical experience. Spontaneous and uninvited mystical experiences can in some cases be distressing, as the individual may lose their sense of self, have difficulties communicating with others, hear voices, see visions, and be unable to engage in everyday activities or work during the experience. A spiritual path such as paganism can help people who have such experiences to make sense of their experiences and to interpret them in a positive way. Bitena and Martinson argue that psychotic experiences are surprisingly common amongst mentally well people, with rates of auditory hallucinations in the general population across a number of different countries ranging from 0.6% to 84%. Psychotic experiences and odd or anomalous experiences are often not related to psychiatric disorders and can often be integrated without help from mental health professionals. Many people interpret such experiences as illuminating, giving a sense of purpose or a sense of certainty. Bitena and Martinson argue that experiences previously defined as psychotic are now being found to be common and non-pathological, and that they can often be redefined as mystical experiences which can be beneficial and are associated with being more open to experience, greater satisfaction with life, greater emotional stability, more compassion for self and others, and a greater ability to listen to one's own body and to the environment. Bitena and Martinson states that the concept of spiritual intelligence was defined by King in 2008, who said that spiritual intelligence involves awareness and the ability to apply transcendental and non-material aspects of existence, and to be able to enter and exit higher states at will. Alternative spiritual paths such as paganism, magical traditions and yoga teach adherents to do this, and to therefore harness the positive effects of mystical experiences. Spiritual intelligence involves developing abilities which can be improved and trained, and includes critical existential thinking, the ability to create meaning and understand the purpose of life, the ability to recognise the transcendental, and the ability to reach higher or broader states of consciousness. Bitena and Martinson found that in their research sample of 299 Latvian women, there was a significant correlation between mystical experience and spiritual intelligence, with a growing trend for mystical experiences to be interpreted as spiritual phenomenon. There was also found to be an increased interest in spirituality following such experiences. They also found some correlation between mystical experiences and schizotypal traits, but not with all. The strongest correlations were with unusual beliefs and perceptions, as would be expected. No correlation was found between mystical experiences and other schizotypal traits such as social detachment, cognitive dysregulation, or restricted affectivity. A weak correlation was found between mystical experience and psychotic symptoms, which the researchers suggest is consistent with previous data, indicating that mystical experiences can also have negative effects. A significant positive relationship was found between spiritual intelligence and certain schizotypal traits, but again, only to unusual beliefs and perceptions. Bitena and Martinson also found that mystical experience was a moderator between spiritual intelligence and schizotypal personality traits, but that there was no significant correlation between spiritual intelligence and psychotic symptoms. Bitena and Martinson's research and the concept of spiritual intelligence give another and non-pathological perspective on why people may be attracted to paganism and other alternative spiritual beliefs. In my survey, around 30% of those who identified as pagan stated that they had come to paganism through having had a spiritual experience or contact with deity which called them to explore. Such experiences may be another form of difference, which they experience, and they seek a path which validates and explains their experiences, as well as other people who have had similar experiences. Through immersion in the pagan path, they can not only find explanations and interpretations for their experiences, but can learn techniques to control such experiences and to be able to enter mystical states at will, and such practices reinforce their experiences. I began this presentation with the proposition that many people are attracted to paganism because they feel different, and that within paganism they find their home, a place where they no longer feel alienated. For individuals with neurodiverse experiences and positive schizotypy, the quest for personal meaning and existential understanding may be particularly salient. Conventional religious frameworks and societal norms may not fully resonate with their unique ways of perceiving and engaging with the world. As a result, alternative spiritual paths that emphasise individual exploration, direct experience, and personal empowerment may offer a more compelling avenue for navigating the complexities of existence. The benefits of adopting alternative spiritual paths, such as paganism, for neurodiverse individuals may include an increased sense of belonging and acceptance within a community that values diversity of thought, opportunities for personal growth, self-discovery and healing through spiritual practices that cater to individual needs, and improved mental health outcomes for individuals who find resonance in alternative spiritual ideologies. In addition, there has been a tendency to pathologise spiritual experiences within psychology and within the medical professions, and even terms such as positive schizotypy are drawn from the language of pathology. Mystical experiences are classed as unusual, but may also be more common than has often been thought, and removing pathological labels such as schizotypy and concentrating instead on the possible benefits of such experiences and the development of spiritual intelligence may prove more useful going forward. The exploration of neurodiversity, positive schizotypy, and alternative spiritual paths also underscores the importance of embracing diversity and pluralism within society. Rather than pathologising or marginalising individuals with atypical neurological experiences or unconventional spiritual beliefs, it is important to recognise and honour the richness and complexity of human diversity. And psychologists, psychiatrists, and other mental health professionals can benefit from a more nuanced understanding of how individual differences and more unusual thinking and experiences intersect with spiritual and existential concerns. This could also inform more culturally sensitive and individualised approaches to therapy, and support for individuals with diverse neurological and spiritual orientations when therapy is necessary. This area of inquiry invites ongoing dialogue and collaboration across disciplines, offering opportunities for further exploration and understanding. I'm now giving on the screen the references that I've used for this talk, and I hope you enjoyed this talk and found it useful, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.